What's up, guys? This is Pete, and welcome to the Carrot Poker Podcast. This is the third or fourth episode of 2018, with lots more on the way. And I have my friend and student Tuvia with me today. How's it going, man?
It's going fantastic. A great day here at beautiful, fabulous Las Vegas.
I do miss Vegas. It's been a while since I've been over there. I didn't really like the fact that wandering around it felt like being blasted in the face with a hairdryer, but apart from that, it was great. I mean,
that is true. It does feel like that.
you get used to it, though. And at least it's not humid. That's the main thing, right? It's like dry heat.
I come from Tennessee, an extremely humid climate. To me, this is heaven. Yeah. I don't mind the dry heat at all.
Absolutely. So I brought you on the show today because I think you're a pretty interesting guy. You've got a lot to talk about, poker related. You love the game. We've been working together for maybe 6 months now, intermittently. And what originally interested me in you when we first met was that you've played backgammon at a really high level, and that was like your background before you got into poker, right?
Yeah, I did a world backgammon tour for 2 years, and it was one of the best times of my life for sure.
That's awesome. So what's the backgammon scene like compared to the poker scene for anyone who's interested in trying it out?
Okay, well, there's one massive advantage to the backgammon scene that the poker scene doesn't have. If you want to sit down with the greatest backgammon player in the world and play them, you can do that your very first tournament, which I did. And I have some interesting stories if you're interested about that. But backgammon is a much smaller community. Now, in the 70s and 80s, it was bigger than poker. It was as big as the poker boom was in America. Everybody played it. And then in the 90s, it died completely. And now it's a very small game in the U.S.
And do you think that's partially because of the rise of poker?
No, it was because people were playing it for 20 years and people wanted to find a new game, and also the Crushers came out. People love to gamble, okay? But then the Crushers, there was the first program called Jellyfish came out, and once Jellyfish, that's what it really was. When Jellyfish came out, you couldn't gamble anymore because you just lose your money too fast. The edge in backgammon is humongous, bigger than poker, and there's less variance. So the fish just left.
Yeah, that must have been a bit of a sting for everyone playing at that point. That was a terrible joke about Jellyfish, by the way, in case you didn't get that.
Oh my, dude! It was too clever for me. It went over my head.
Don't know about that, but yeah. So that's interesting that they had like solvers back then in backgammon. So I guess what I'm interested about, and what many of the audience might be interested about with backgammon, is like, what is it? Like, it's obviously a very high variance game, right? Like, for anyone who doesn't understand backgammon, there's a lot of skill in the game, but it can really go. Is it fair to say that the game can literally just swing like crazy over the short term?
Oh my God, yes. And let me just tell you something about backgammon. If you don't know anything about backgammon, let me explain to you what backgammon is. Mm-hmm. It is literally chess with dice. It has the positional understanding of chess, a little bit of mathematics. It's not a heavy mathematic game at all, just a little probabilities. It is a largely positional understanding game like chess. Many chess players would love backgammon. There's a lot of variance. I'll tell you the worst variance ever. It was also the highest stakes game I ever played in my life. This was when I was living in Japan. It was a $50 a point game against a drunk guy. This guy had 10 sakes deep. We played for 3 days. Every night he would drink himself stupid. He was making the most insane equity plays. We were checking these plays, but the variance, he won like 16 cube gammons that were insane. And I got wrecked. And I said, I'm done with high-stakes gambling and backgammon, and I never did it again.
Wow. It's just like one of those things that's like, it's going to make or break like your journey in that particular field, how you run in that one massive shot that you take. And it's just, I find that in poker as well, that some of the stuff that separates the really well-known ballers from the guys that nobody's heard about is that the former ran like God at some point when they played high stakes, and the latter just ran like terribly. And they end up being famous and the other guys are unknown, and I guess it works like that in any game with variance.
Dude, I am 100% sure, by the way, that is the case in both cash and MTTs as well. 100% sure.
Absolutely.
That is the case. That is the beauty, though. That's what I love about gambling, and I'll never quit gambling because of that. I love that.
Absolutely. The uncertainty is pretty good. So, I guess like one other thing we should talk about with backgammon, is a good poker player naturally going to be good at backgammon?
I will qualify that with one statement.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I've learned one thing. Josh Waitzkin was a great chess genius, made famous by Searching for Bobby Fischer, the movie, and he wrote a fantastic book called The Art of Learning. And his argument is basically there is a GTO way to learn every game. And if you understand that, then you can succeed in any game. So if you understand how to study poker, backgammon is easier to study because you have a perfect computer to check your plays. So you always know the correct play. There is actually a big exploitative side to backgammon, which is much more fascinating than poker, but you don't have to go there to crush. Okay? You don't have to go there to crush. Although you can actually, it's crazy because it's actually not true. I don't know. It's very complicated in backgammon. The war between exploitative GTO is a much more fascinating thing in backgammon than poker.
That's interesting.
Because GTO is so well known in backgammon. You know the GTO play 100%.
Yeah.
In poker, nobody knows what the GTO play is. So anyone who's playing 2-5 and says they're an exploitative player is just a fish, because there's no such thing. Okay, nobody knows the GTO play. But in backgammon, you know the GTO play, so now exploitative is very, very real.
Yeah, I mean, we are getting I would say maybe partially in response to that we are getting quite close to like what is at least consistent with a GTO strategy in many spots, if we know what the ranges are to start with. But the main difference there, and I think like the most illuminating thing that you said that was a really good point, is that in poker, you actually do have to maximally exploit your opponents to beat the rake, to win long term, to be someone who ascends through the player pool. And in backgammon, sticking to the GTO is actually going to be enough. And that's a really cool distinction, I think.
Oh, God, yes. If you are a GTO backgammon crusher, you will win money hand over fist so fast. The exploitative play really comes up in tournament match play at crazy match scores. That's when it really comes in. But if you're just a cash game grinder, you just play your GTO game and don't worry, and you will crush. And there's not a single exploitative thing. Except with cube. There is bluffing. If your opponent is weak and he's dropping cubes, you have to double earlier.
So what does that mean? Just for anyone who doesn't know the rules of
yes.
backgammon, what is the cube? What's the significance
So the cube lets you raise the stakes in the middle of the game, lets you double the stakes in the middle of the game. In the beginning, the cube is in the center, and either player can raise. But once you raise, if your opponent takes, and he can pass and fold right now, and the game is over, and he loses 1 point. If he takes the cube, the game continues, and it's worth 2 points, but only he has access to that cube now. So only he can re-raise you to 4. If the game turns around and he gets lucky, he can now re-raise you to 4.
It's a little bit like position in poker. Only one player has true control over whether the pot grows or not. And I guess it's a bit like if doubling the cube could be maybe analogous to betting half of the pot then. So if there's $2 in the pot and I bet one...
You're getting 3-1 in the call effective. So you need 25% on theoretical raw odds to call. It's actually less. You need 21.5 because of that recube VIG, right?
Yeah.
Because if you own the VIG, that position is worth 3.5% in backgammon.
So the ability to have control of the cube on the next decision point actually reduces the equity target that you need to accept the bet, to accept the cube, i.e. to make the call. So already we've drawn a pretty cute analogy there between backgammon and poker.
Correct. And that is GTO. That is GTO. That is a GTO number. That is what the computer came up with, 3.5%.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's find out a bit more about you then. So you were going around the world for 2 years playing high stakes backgammon, playing against like some of the best players in the world at tournaments and things like that.
And I ran like a god at tournaments. Excellent. I ran way better than some people in their entire lives. I shipped 2 tournaments. I got to the consolation finals of Monte Carlo, where Gus Hansen was there commentating the main finals, but I was playing in the other room, and I won. And I just ran like a god. And I improved my game dramatically. But even when I was an absolute fish, and I registered for the Masters tournament in New York, shipped it against the 2 best players in the world. Pure luck. It was a godsend, baby. I love it.
Excellent. So you're obviously a very passionate guy about your games. Like, you clearly love your games. Did you play anything else in between, or has it just been backgammon and now poker?
So I played poker when I was 12 years old. My brother discovered Yahoo Texas Poker, and I played on Yahoo, and I played with friends, and then Rounders came out. We loved that movie, and then WPT came out. We watched every single episode for years, and we had a home game. So I've been playing poker for a long time, and I had 1 million hands by the time I was 30 years old.
Nice. Do you ever play like chess or bridge or any other games, or is it just been those two?
Yes, I played a lot of chess. I never got good, but I used to play blindfolded against fish. So
Nice.
I was able to do that, which I was proud of, but I never was good at chess. And I played a lot of video games. I love video games as well to relax my mind from hard games like poker.
Definitely.
Play a shit ton of video games and Settlers of Catan, Risk, Monopoly, all of
I
those
love
games.
Catan. We actually have a gaming circle now where we keep a leaderboard at home and have various
Yeah,
different friends come over and, we'll drink and
awesome.
stuff and they'll
We
be
got to
like,
play online for money. We'll play
let me
online.
get really, really good at it first and then maybe I'll
But
take
that's
you up
not
on that
fair.
one.
I'm not good. I'm a fan. I just play for fun. $5
Yeah,
a game.
that's what they always say. I bet you said that at Backgammon as well. So let's talk about your transition into poker then, like taking it seriously, because it's fair to say then that, well, you played poker all those years ago on Yahoo, only recently did you sort of dedicate yourself to the game fully. So what made you
Yep.
re-fall in love with the game to the extent that you
Okay.
wanted to take it that seriously?
Well, I will tell you right now. First of all, so I moved to Vegas last year, and I always planned on it. I wanted to travel the world until I was 30 and then settle down. That was my plan,
Yep.
and I definitely have seen a ton of the world, and I feel fulfilled in that. And now I want to settle and not move around much more.
Cool.
So I'm in Vegas, and I know that I have to gamble the rest of my life. I'm a complete degen, completely addicted to gambling. So poker is the game of choice because there's so many variations if I want to change, and also it's just 24/7 action, and I have to have that, and I want that. So I was decided, let's check into poker. Oh, well, before even that happens, I come to Vegas like, okay, let's jump into the World Series of Poker. I cash my first two events back to back. So that's one way to get in,
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I'm a god. I'm a natural. I'm a genius, right? The worst thing ever that could have happened to me was cashing in those two events back to back right off the bat. One of them was in fucking PLO where I quadrupled up. I had aces versus kings versus queens versus jacks. I covered them all, and guy flopped a jack. I had an ace on the river. Rep Porter was at that table to witness it. And I'm like, this is the game. I am a god. I was in cloud nine heaven. It was amazing.
Yeah, I had a similar experience actually where I used to play with I used to play sit and goes, and I remember taking like my first shot at like 100 NL cash back in the day and like having a +7 buy-in session and just being like, that's it, I'm going to quit my job in the next week.
That's so
And I think-
exactly me also.
I
That's
think
exactly
everyone's
me.
been there to some extent where they just
Yes.
get that diluted.
It's
but
part of the
it's-
learning process. You have to go through it to be a successful poker player. Unless some people don't need that, but most do. I needed it.
Yeah, and some people run bad right off the bat and then never play poker again, and maybe that would have
Right.
been the true worst thing that could ever have happened.
That's
Maybe
so
the second worst was you running like God. So after those two tournaments, at what point and how did you start to realize that, hold on a minute, maybe I'm not such a god after all?
Okay, well, it was a very long process, and I'll tell you why. I'm one of those people that has such a massive ego that I don't think I have an ego. I'm one of those guys. So it was a really long process of, I would do some studying, but then not enough, and I would think, okay, I've learned enough now that I'm beating, and of course, there's no way to build a sample size within, this much time. So I'm like, well, I'm a humble guy. I'm only beating 1-3 live for 3 bigs an hour. I'm only beating it for 4 bigs an hour. I'm not saying I'm beating it for 10 bigs an hour. I'm not saying that, but I wasn't beating it for 3 or 4 bigs. I was losing.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want to admit it, but I knew something was wrong because I was tilting and it wasn't who I was as a person. I know it's just a game. I have the most blessed life ever. Like, it's just a game and I'm getting upset. And nothing I say before, nothing I do is stopping this tilt. So something is wrong here, and I don't know what it is.
So
okay?
hang on, quick question, right, to interrupt for
Yeah.
a second. When you played high stakes backgammon and things like that prior to
Yes.
this, are you saying that you didn't tilt in anywhere near the same level?
Excellent question. Let me tell you what happened. So for the first 2 years, I played backgammon for about 2.5 years, pretty serious. For 2 years, I was an absolute fantastic sport, the best in the game. And then at my last tournament, I did something that was very out of character for me. I didn't say anything mean, but I was playing an opponent who was bitching about their dice, and then they, of course, were a complete fish and then won the match. And I wanted to say, why were you bitching the entire time when you won the match? I didn't say anything, but I just got up and walked away, and I felt very upset. And I never had that before at backgammon, so I stopped playing backgammon. it scared me. I was like, what? I was like, wow, that's not me, and that something's going on here. And I felt like, and so I'm like, I think you felt entitled to that victory because I was getting better at backgammon at that point, and now I was becoming a winning player, and I was like, well, maybe you feel entitled, and it was an ego thing and all this, but I didn't like it, so I stayed away, actually. And I went to poker because I'm like, well, backgammon is very Let me qualify one more thing. Backgammon is much more tilting than poker. It's constant heads-up action.
Yeah.
You're constantly getting. It's the worst thing. And when you run bad, it's a nonstop brew. And I said, I can't handle this heads up anymore.
Yeah.
I fell in love with the full ring aspect of poker. I love it. There's so much time. You get to fold a lot. You can take breaks.
Yeah.
And I can never leave that again.
It's a lot less intense, isn't it? I mean, the thing with backgammon is that it feels very kind of adversarial. I remember showing my girlfriend the rules of the game, and we played like 2 games, and I ran like double sixes. If there was a block that she left, I hit it twice. I came on and hit it at the same time, over and over again. She's just sitting there like, this game's terrible. I'm never ever playing this game again. And now I don't even take the backgammon set like on holiday, because that one experience was enough to just be like completely brutal. So I've also been on the receiving end of that as well, when I used to play with a friend and just used to, like, we used to gamble and drink and all of that. And like, I just remember one night losing every single game and just thinking, this is like the worst I've ever felt from any game in my life. And I'd been a professional poker player at the time for years. And I just couldn't get my head around why it was so infuriating.
It's called the cruelest game in the world for a reason. Backgammon is known as the cruelest game in the world. It's for true sickos, and I'm going to be honest here. There's many mean and bad sport players in the backgammon community. Very many bad sports, and I did not want to become that person, so I quit. I don't quit now. So now I came back, and I'll play in about 3 tournaments a year, and I play in fun games. But I always take many big breaks in between the backgammon tournaments because it's too much, and I have to recognize that. I feel as I get older. Actually, I feel like now though, I feel like now I won't have that problem. I think poker has helped me get over this in general. I can discuss that if you want, the poker aspect.
Yeah, interesting. I think we need to also relate this for poker players, because regardless of the format that you play, you're going to encounter bad stretches of variance where the tilt accumulates, because it's not just I tilt today, I don't tomorrow. It's an accumulation, and when we run bad for various stretches of time, be it a week, a day, 5 hours, a night, maybe just 2 hands in a row is enough sometimes, it builds up and we feel like we are crumbling, like we're losing all of our solid foundations that we thought we once had. So as someone who's been there and played a lot of a game that's even more tilting than poker, how do you prevent that build up? Like, how do you strike the balance between?
Well, I'll tell you how I solved it in poker, and actually that was the most I ever learned, way more than backgammon. Here's what I did. Okay. 6 months ago, I was in the middle of a 2-month very bad downswing of many bad beats. It was the worst of my life. I had never gambled this much in my life. I was in the midst of a 2-month severe downswing in very good spots, and it was very bad, and I was not happy. So I went to the mirror and I said, something's not right. And you know what it is, and I knew what it was, and I knew how to fix it. And I fixed it, and here's what I did. I said, first, you got to say out loud, you're probably not beating 1-3 live cash. You're not beating 1-3 live cash. So I said it like 8 times, and immediately like 100-pound weight was off my shoulders. I'm a losing poker player. Big deal. There's only one place to go now, and I immediately knew that I was going to make it now. So I said, okay, you know what you need to do. It's what your coach told you on day one. You need a 75% study, 25% play ratio. You're a beginner. You don't know what you're doing. You suck. You're not winning at poker. This is why you're tilting, because you're a loser. So study and stop making excuses. You know what you're doing. And I did just that. I played 100,000 hands with Poker Snowy, and I said, forget everything else. I'm going to learn a tight GTO game and not not take it personal. I was taking poker way too personal.
Mhm.
When my opponents beat me, you know what I realized it was? I felt like I was getting bullied. I got bullied a lot as a kid. I got in a lot of fights in high school, and that's what it was. I was taking it so personal when someone was beating me, and now that I see everything through the lens of GTO, I don't take it personal. My opponent. I don't underestimate my opponents. I don't care what they're doing. It's not about them. It's about making the right decision right now. So I studied my ass off for the last 6 months, and I'm going to keep this 75-25 ratio as long as I can and as long as I burn out. Then when I burn out, then I'll play, but I'm going to keep this going. That's the one weird trick. You want one weird trick, one secret to poker? Study your ass off on GTO, and you'll make it.
Yeah, or even study exploitative players, study something, or study default ranges. Even if you're not using a program like Poker Snowy or Pio, at least read a solid book like the Grinder's Manual, plug, hint, hint. But that aside, read a book, get a coach, listen to the right podcast.
There's so many great videos.
Study, and don't think... I think I want to get back to like my favourite part of what you just said there, which was this idea of the average student, and I think it happens to everyone, struggling immensely under their own expectations, under the weight of that boulder that they already think they're good. And as soon as you lifted that boulder and said, I am a rubbish poker player, I have so much to learn, I'm a loser, you suddenly knew that you were going to make it because you felt lighter and you felt like you could now get onto the right path.
I felt so good the next day because I didn't care if I lost. Losers are supposed to lose. Beginners are supposed to lose, and it's okay. But if you study, you can make it. And that is what I understood very strongly. And I decided, and I asked myself another question, a very important question. What is the life EV play here you want to make with poker? What is the life EV play? And I said, I know what it is here. I want to treat poker like a professional hobby. I want to study it much more than backgammon, but I don't want to, and I want to make it a part-time job, but I can always take breaks from it if I want to, but I want to take it very seriously because it's something I wanted to try. I've never taken many things seriously, and I wanted to try going deep into a game because it looks very fun, and it is very fun to win and to play a style well. It might not be the best. It might not be the most EV. My goal, my life EV is not to make the most money. So I realized that my goal is not to make the most EV in every spot. My goal is to play a good game that's easy on my brain, that can keep me afloat in the life, because I love going to the casino and playing poker. I love the game, and you can also crush 2-5 and even 5-10 once you become really good. And you could probably crush higher if you become a GTO. I'm sure you can. I'm sure the top crushers are really just GTO crushers. But anyway, I made the life EV play to take an easier strategy with a clear study plan for to make it to where I can see the light much easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's fair to say, though, isn't it, that you're quite an eccentric character. Not that that's obvious from the interview at all, but you're very, very committed and you're very, very passionate about the things that you do. And what I feel might be a breakdown here in what you're saying, while it's very, very good advice for you personally, what about my students, right, who don't have that same blinkered determination, that iron-willed focus on taking one game and studying the absolute crap out of it until they become that good? How do people with lesser motivation than yourself, which is probably everyone I coach, actually get to the point where they can take the game that seriously and make themselves get good at it?
That's a great question, and honestly, I'm not sure, but I'll tell you that I was that person as well. I wasn't like bored. I'm motivated now because I got myself motivated, and here's how. I started to enjoy winning. Winning is a lot more fun than losing. And when I saw that studying GTO was increasing my bankroll very fast and very significantly, it made me want to study it more and more and more, and that was it.
I think that's great, and that was exactly the same for me. When I started winning, and in 2010, I couldn't lose a pot in 2010. That was the making of me. That was my run good year where every single thing I did just worked. And because I ran so good that year, it actually made me feel like I need to work harder now because I've tasted success and I know what it feels like, and that spurred me on. But where I think a lot of aspiring players, and we need to remember that this is definitely first and foremost a podcast for people who have not yet tasted that, it's really difficult, I think, for the learner to get to that point where they hit that first success. So I think, first of all, in my opinion, there has to be some kind of shifting of the goalposts, if you like, where the goal becomes process and progress oriented and not actually to do with winning yet. And then once you get that sweet taste of success by working hard, and I mean long-term success, not just running good one day or 1 week, that's when you can sort of use that. But what did you do before you were a winning player?
One thing here, exactly what you just said. I want to actually correct what I said to agree with you. Let me. When I started to study GTO, and after that I had that revelation, I ran bad for another month.
Right.
But I was not tilting. It didn't discourage me. You know why? Because I could go into Pio Solver, I could go into Poker Snowy and put in my plays, and I could see I either made the right play and got unlucky, or I made the wrong play and I learned. Okay, so that's what I would tell new players, because now if you take my approach, which is a GTO approach, you have a fallback method to make sure you're not fucking up crazy. If you do exploitative, I had no clue how to check my exploitative plays. That's impossible for a beginner.
Absolutely.
It really makes no sense. So now that I had a very tight, balanced GTO strategy, I could say, okay, did I make the right play with this hand here? And I could find out very close, yes or no.
That's a nice point. I think like one of the things I do with a new student as well is they come to me for coaching and they'll say something to me to the effect of like, oh yeah, well, here we want to find out where we're at, or we want to bet for information, or we think this guy has this, or we think he thinks this. And they're floundering around in the dark, you know, because they don't know how to actually think exploitatively, but because they have absolutely no game theory framework, they think that that's the only way to learn, is to make random guesses and assumptions about what's going on exploitatively. So what I say to them is, we'll get to the exploitative stuff in a minute. First off, let's just figure out what we should do in the absence of any of that things that he's thinking. Let's pretend we don't know what he's thinking. Let's pretend that we don't know what the population's range is. What would be solid? And then you've got a framework to at least avoid making horrible plays for absolutely no reason. So that's
what you do. Yeah, what you do is you pretend that his range is Snowies. That's what I do. I pretend that all of my opponent's ranges are Snowies. I don't care what they show. Yes, if they're jamming any two cards, if they're crazy, I'm for sure going to make the obvious, easy adjustments.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I pretend they're Snowy every time, because that's what balance means. You don't know if he has Ace King or the Jack 4. He might just say, I'm going to take this Jack 4 randomly and spew and then show, and then play tight for the next 6 hours. I don't know what the fuck the fish are thinking.
However, right?
I don't know what the fish are thinking, and I don't care what they're thinking. I want to know what Snowy is thinking, and I love it.
Okay. However, a lot of populations that these listeners are actually playing in, the games will actually have population leaks, like tendencies that the population exhibits. For example, if you play in 1-2 Live, which is a game that I spent some of my youth in, drinking and playing and learning and, you know, winning only because everyone else was even worse than I was before I was serious about poker. In that game, you know, if someone 3-bets you when you open under the gun, you don't defend the GTO range because you know that their range is like aces and kings about 95% of the time. So while you can pretend that everyone is Snowy when you play higher, I think it's important that the student does make population reads, not that they have an exact hand, but knows the rough percentages that things will be generally true of their population, and adjusts not just on the level of individual to individual, but also individual to population as well, because that will show a higher EV over the long run.
Yes, I agree 100% with this, especially at 1-3 Live, which I did a lot of grinding of. There, you don't have a 4-bet bluffing range at 1-3 Live.
Correct.
You don't.
Correct.
And it wouldn't make sense, yes. Because that's such an easy exploit to have.
Yep.
So yes, 1-3 Live is a very different game because the rake is so high. So yes, and 1-3 Live is a special game that requires its own set of skills. And once so you know what the first thing I did, by the way, started studying actually before even GTO, was the effect of the rake on the game. That was the first thing I studied because I realized I was playing way too many hands pre in a high-raked game. You can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was losing to the rake. I couldn't beat the rake with my pre-flop ranges. Impossible.
Yep.
So that was the first step. Then that kind of led me into the natural GTO progression.
And I think that's an important point because a lot of people start off playing poker and they are so wrapped up in the strategy of the game that they want to see expected value as something that's detached fully from rake. But of course, in the real world, there's this horrible tax that you have to pay on everything that just changes the EV of all of your plays. And we don't want to accept that because it detracts from the purity of the game, for sure, but it's real. and it's there. And that's why I say to students, don't open King Jack off in the hijack on this reggy table just because it looks okay to you. That's only because your subconscious does not process the concept of rake at all. It's actually losing.
You want to know what blew my mind when I read this line, and I never underestimated the reg again?
Mm-hmm.
A 5'10" reg is going to watch $325,000 go to the rake if he plays every day for a year in his table.
Yeah.
$325,000 in rake on a 5'10" table per year. That's how much the casinos make.
Doesn't surprise me. And another thing is that when we play online, let's say as well, and we build up a database of like 1 million, 2 million hands, whatever, and then we look at our winnings and we say, that's nice, I made like 125k over those couple of years, that's pretty reasonable, I'm happy with that. Then we look at rake paid and it's like 190k. It's usually more than the amount we've profited by. Right. So of those marginal spots where you think, oh, this is close, I can probably open this, right. Is it really?
Right. The rake makes it a massive minus EV play.
Yep.
And I had to study that to be good at 1-3.
And here's another point I was saying to a student. The student I taught just before you tonight, actually, I was saying this. I was saying that in a spot that doesn't get raked, like in some live casinos are absolute criminals and they'll rake pre-flop in a stolen pot, button versus blinds. But online, you open the button.
Tournaments in the early levels are not raked, so things like that.
Right, things like that. So online, or in a tournament or whatever, where you open the button, big blind folds, or say you're on the button, there's 2 tight players in the blinds. You want to make an adjustment. You want to say, okay, Jack 6 off. Not a hand I'd normally open, but today in this spot, I'm going to do it because of these tight players. That's fine. That loosening up is fine because the nature of that spot is one that does not normally go to the flop and it doesn't normally create a rake-paying environment. However, when you loosen up by opening King Jack off under the gun, you see the flop most of the time. Or you open up by cold calling a hand against an open, even worse. Now you either pay rake in 100% of cases, or fold pre-flop and don't see the flop. That's a spot where the rake will annihilate you. So it's not just that rake presides over all of poker, it mainly kills people in spots where they have to see the flop very, very often if they're going to play the hand. So that's something to think about.
That's a huge point. Like, these are all huge things that were killing, that were making me a loser at 1-3. And I just didn't even know about this. So there was no way. But as soon as I became humble and took that weight off of like you said, the weight just lifted. Because I had a massive ego, and no one with a massive ego wants to admit. I want to believe I'm a genius that can be great at anything instantly. I want to believe that. Everybody wants to believe that. But I was losing money. You can't deny walking away with no money. You can't deny that in the middle of a cooler, and it broke my ego in the best way possible. And it's helped me in a lot of things, especially the mental game, though, because I don't mind losing to opponents now, and I don't underestimate my opponents, and I don't underestimate casual players. They can make great plays sometimes, and I don't take it personal.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think it's also there's a difference between a player who has a big ego who has found out that that's the case and takes it with a pinch of salt and says, I know I have this trait, I need to deliberately counter this now, which is like yourself, and a guy that's so wrapped up in his own ego that he will deny, like you said at the start who you used to be, that you would deny that you even had an ego because your ego was that huge. And I was that kid as well.
But now that I've conquered my ego's even bigger. I'm like, look at me, I'm an ego conqueror now, and now I'm the greatest person of all time. So now I'm just like totally fucked level gaming myself.
This is blowing my mind. This is like meta egos, like egos
it's a leveling game, man. I hate it.
And making more egos and bigger egos, and it sounds great.
That's why GTO doesn't care about your ego. That's what I love about GTO. It doesn't care if you jam 7 deuce every hand; it will not adjust to you because it has no ego. Snowy has no ego, and I need that because I have such a massive ego. I need to learn from Snowy.
Yeah, and when you play against a really good poker player, and like we've all been there, where we have that feeling in our career, like this guy's just crushing me. What is he doing? It actually feels like playing against a cold-hearted kind of robot automaton kind of creature.
And it's an ego. It's an ego hurt. It hurts egos. And now, let me tell you. Last night I was playing 2-5 live. A guy comes down. He's an asshole right off the bat. He's a kasoof too. Okay, and this guy is terrible. And he loses all his money. And and I hope that he learns a lesson and doesn't be a douchebag next time at the table. I really do. I'm not trying to teach lessons at the table, but don't be a. And he starts talking about Mike. He was talking to the guy next to me. He's like, "You did this tell in Mike Carroll's book 3 times." And of course, we're just cracking up. Like, this guy is garbage, and he thinks he's such a shit. He's talking like all this trash. He's being a complete douche, and I love it being on this side. That's what's keeping me studying. I want to stay on the winning side. I like being the house. I like dealing the craps. I don't like shooting craps anymore. I'd much rather deal. Let players place the hard 8. If you're going to win sometimes against me, and that's okay, and I can get over that. The house doesn't have an ego. The house doesn't get upset when someone hits a hard 8. Okay, and when you approach the game like that, you take the personality and the emotions out of it, and you just try and run a casino against X.
That's a great place if you can get to it. Absolutely a great bar
it's
to
not the
aim
highest
for
TV.
eventually.
It won't make you the most money every time, but it will give you a lot of peace of mind, and it's a great life. For me, it was a great life EV choice. So there you go.
Definitely. My douchebag story is that I was playing in the Golden Nugget downtown Vegas one night, which is, as you know, probably one of the softer and weirder games that you're likely to play in. And there's this guy who's dressed up in all this bling and this white suit and top hat and cane and all of this kind of stuff. And he's got long, scraggly hair. He looks like a Californian homeless guy that won the lottery and decided to act like he was really rich. So anyway, he sits down at the table and he's just berating everyone. And I was actually playing on the adjacent table. I wasn't on this table, but you couldn't not listen to this guy because he's shouting and, flaunting and showboating and all the rest of it. And he gets into this spot. And he's very, very deep. This is like a 1-2 game, but he's probably 1,600 deep. A lot of buy-ins deep with this other kid. And he gets to the river, and the guy goes to make a bet, and Rich, white hat, top hat, cane guy goes, call. And the kid hasn't bet anything yet, but now the kid says, what's the ruling on this? And the dealer says, you can bet wherever you want, and he has to call. And I don't know if this is the right ruling, but then the kid goes, I'm all in for 1,600. And the guy's like, I'm not calling that. And he's like, you have to call. You've already called. Your money is now effectively in the pot. And of course, the kid who shoves has the nuts, and the guy has third pair, and the kid has the nut flush. And he calls the floor over, and eventually it gets to the point where he's shouting and screaming and threatening to order airstrikes from his private fleet of helicopters onto the kid's house. And this is actually what, and I'm drinking at the bar by this point, I think, actually. And I'm just it's just hilarious. It was fantastic. So I think oftentimes in poker, there are role models and there are anti-role models as well. And having one on either side is a nice balance to help you find the right path.
Yes, and there are also jokers that make your life very fun and interesting at the table. That's one of the reasons I love playing live. Mm-hmm. For those characters, you get to see some funny-ass shit. It's like a live soap opera. Yeah. I love poker in every single way of the game. It's beautiful. What can I say? Best game ever made, that and Mahjong. 2 best games ever. And nice. Backgammon. Backgammon's good. But
I would throw Bridge into the list because I've fallen in love with it in the last few years.
Yeah, I'm scared of Bridge. You're going to have to... I'll teach you Backgammon, you teach me Bridge.
That sounds like fun. Only, I don't know if I like Backgammon because of that time I lost considerably to that guy. I think I'm too tilty. I've worked on my mental game for years and still tilt too much at poker, so I think I'll leave Backgammon. Anyway, so we've got to the point in your life then where you're playing 2-5 now, so you've graduated from 1-3. Are you playing professionally now in Vegas while you're out there?
No. First of all, look. I go to both. I go down to 1-3, 2-5. I don't know which one I'm doing better at.
Right.
1-3 is a much easier pool, but the 2-5 tables are a little harder. But I'm learning how to play against the regs. If you play a tight game, you usually don't mess with them anyway, and they know to stay away from you. So 2-5. But again, I don't have enough sample size, and I don't even track my stuff because I'm never going to stop this 75-25 study. Okay. I don't care what my win rate is. If it's 10, 20 bigs an hour, I don't give a shit. I'm going to continue this.
So you're more just in love with the game right now than you are.
I'm in love with the game. I'm in a honeymoon phase, and I'm sure I'm going to, if I can't, I take breaks. I don't want to burn out. In Backgammon, I made sure to take breaks, and I never burned out of Backgammon. So poker, I'm not hitting it too hard, and I love studying. With Snowy, it's very relaxing, so I'm making sure to pace myself. I'm not doing it full-time, but I'm definitely seeing this could be a part-time job the rest of my life and keep me busy and make some friends along the way. So I'm very considering taking it as a part-time job, but never full-time. Unless it just the money rolls in and I have money hand over fist, then what am I going to do? But I'm not going to try for that, ever.
Awesome.
If it happens, it happens.
Cool. So it sounds like you've made a hell of a lot of progress in both mental game and technical game recently. So what made you want to hire one of the final questions of this interview. What made you actually want to hire a coach? Because when I started working with you, I remember you had a lot of ideas about like what GTO was and stuff like that. Did things like, why did you want coaching at first if you were so sure that you were already a god, right, at that point? And then what changed when you got coaching?
So here's the truth. I knew I wasn't a god, okay? But I just thought I was better than I was.
Right.
You know, I thought I could figure it out on my own. I thought and I thought I was studying enough, and I wasn't. I was approaching it half-ass. My study sessions were half-ass, you know. So it wasn't like that. I knew I was not beating a 2.5 even, but I thought I was beating 1.3.
Yeah.
But what made me, well, really, I read the Grinder's Manual, and that book was phenomenal. I read it like 8 times, and I said, and then I found your incredible deal on lessons. That was it. I was like, this is too cheap. I can't pass it up to take up the author of this book, and he is clearly a very strong player, and I need to learn from him. So that's what it was. It was just such a sick deal. So I took you up on it. And
you're saying I should bump rates up for the listeners.
Yeah, you should raise your prices systematically. I would have paid probably double. But I'll say one last thing. Just the fact, when I signed up lessons for you, it was a sign to myself that I'm taking it more serious, and I like that, and it was part of the process of me of the whole growth spurt. You know, I kind of had one of those moments, and this was all, signing up for lessons with you was part of that process.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing, is that students say sometimes, like, by hiring me, they made themselves accountable to themselves as well, because they had like a superior. Because poker is like, it's either your job, in which case you're your own boss, or it's not your job, in which case you're still your own boss when it comes to it. So you need sometimes an outside body to be accountable to, because that's how human beings work. Like, I remember when I first started off on this path of having to motivate myself and create a business of teaching and writing about poker, I was like, how the hell am I ever going to motivate myself to do this work when no one's telling me to do it? And eventually it was that whole taste of success metaphor that we talked about before, where when you taste it, you suddenly become accountable because you know you've got to get that again. But before that, I think it helps a lot of people getting a coach, getting a mentor, getting even a study group, or like friends or peers, or just someone to be accountable to. And I think that is like a huge point. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Okay, man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been really insightful hearing about a backgammon pro transitioning over to poker and falling in love with the game. It makes me feel that, you know, the game is far from dead if people like yourself are still falling in love with it. So that's nice.
The people who say poker is dead are the people that don't put in the time to study and don't beat the game. It's as simple as that. Poker is dead. I've been getting action nonstop. I've never not gotten action. I wish the MTT. I would love my true love is MTTs. I wish there was a daily $300, $25K with a 10% rake. I would kill for that. But that's the one thing I wish, something like that. But outside of that, poker is well alive.
Yeah,
and it's good. The WSOP is right around the corner, and I hope you. Oh, by the way, I hope you come down to Vegas for WSOP.
I will have to at some point. Maybe not this year, but one day if I'm allowed to. Kept on a leash these days, being over 30 like yourself and all of that. But I will definitely love to, and just feel the hairdryer on my face once again, and the rush of playing poker and shooting craps whenever I wanted while drinking a Blue Moon. Yeah. I look forward to it. Anyway, man, it's been great having you on the show. Wish you all the best in your poker career, and we will check back in with you at some point in the near future and see how you're doing. As for listeners, this podcast will be back soon enough. I don't make promises anymore as to when, because that didn't really work, let's face it, but a few weeks I'll get another guest on. And in the meantime, if you're looking to check out any more of my stuff, go to carrotcorner.com. I've got the Grinder's Manual, the book that two of you was just talking about, and also 100 Hands, the follow-up to that, which is more GTO based. Both available on my website. For private coaching, there's a form on there you can fill out in the coaching page, or email me, admin@carrotcorner.com. I'd love to hear feedback as well, and just general questions. Finally, you want to come on the show, just talk about whatever's on your mind about the game. I'm not fussy about who my guests are. I like them to just want to talk about the game and love the game, like our guest did today. So shoot me an email, admin@carrotcorner.com. Love to hear from you on that front as well. Until then, run good, guys. Thank you for listening as always, and speak to you soon. Bye-bye for now.